Everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new episode of AJ Chats. Yeah, a new episode of this series where every other Saturday, bi-weekly, I just sit down and have a little chat about something on my mind. I'm not opening something up. I'm not looking at part of my collection. I'm talking about something to do with film, to do with TV, to do with collecting physical media, whatever it may be. So, welcome. And let's just get into it. Okay, so I wanted to talk this week about physical media collecting and what kind of a collector are you? Now, you could put this into a load of different sort of subcategories of collecting, all this sort of thing that, you might have a casual collector, you might have someone who's an intense collector, but primarily I wanted to look at the differences between a collector and a speculator. Yes, now I've come across this a few times, and I'm not telling people how to spend their money or anything like this. What people do with their money is up to them, and good luck to them. But there are individuals that rather than collecting, they see the investment side, or they look at the investment side in something rather than the fun side in something. And these are known as speculators. Now, speculators, I've come across these a few times. The other day I was going through Facebook, I think it was a Star Trek group, or it might have been a huge, a physical media group. I don't know, that's irrelevant anyway. But what they'd done, they had all of the Star Trek steelbooks, which I've got, and mine are all sealed. I'll come back to that. They had all the Star Trek steelbooks, and they had two sets of them. They had one set completely sealed and one set that they'd opened. And I said to the fella, why have you bought them twice? Why do you feel the need to buy them twice? He goes, oh, so I can look at one set, sealed, and then I can watch the other set. Okay, so now my thinking here is, you're not being honest to me here. What you're doing is you've bought a completely separate second set for the purposes of hoping to make an investment on them at some point down the line. Now, yes, I know that my Star Trek steelbooks are sealed. That being said, however, I do have all of the Star Trek films on Blu-ray. I have them all on DVD, the original series films anyway. And I came to the steelbooks later on. The steelbooks came about, I didn't get them when they were released. I bought some of them a bit cheaper when they were on sale in HMV and places like that. And eventually, and I only went with getting one. My first one was Star Trek Generations. And I didn't really intend on getting more, but then I filled it in till I had the whole lot. And they were all sealed. They were all brand new. But I didn't feel the need to open them because I didn't have to watch them, because I had the Blu-rays anyway in the box set. And since then, I've got the 4K. So that's the sole reason why mine haven't been opened. Everything else I've got is unsealed. Maybe a few steelbooks I've bought that I haven't actually got around to watching yet. But for the most part, everything is open. Now, speculating, me personally, I despise speculating from a collecting perspective. And this comes from my days of comic book collecting. Now, I'm not saying that I haven't ever trod into the realm of the speculative market of purchasing for the hope of stuff coming, going up in price. It used to be a thing that I'd done in the comic book world, maybe in the early 90s, around that sort of era, so a long time ago, and I have learnt since, right? But now I'm seeing it in the physical media world. We're getting so many of these special edition releases at the moment that people are buying them and keeping them sealed. There's that fear of missing out that people will buy films that they don't like. Yes, I did buy Batman. No, I won't bring that up. But I did open it, but that's because I buy every single comic book related TV film, even if I'm not a big fan of it. It's just, it stems from my comic book collecting. But I've seen people buy films that they've outright hated, buy it and justified it by saying I was, scared that it wouldn't be there at some point down the line. But part of that isn't that you're scared it won't be there further down the line. You're scared that it's one of the releases that might skyrocket in price for you. Now, that's rarely going to happen now. That is rarely going to happen because, you know, we're diving into a recession, essentially. People haven't got as much money to play with. Not only that, there's so many of these releases coming out now, right, that not everyone can afford to buy everything they want. I'm in the same boat. I'm letting things go. I don't want to be spending that much money on physical media. So you start being selective. And when people start being selective, these items don't sell out. One item example is the Steelbook of Chucky Season 1. That came out as apparently as a release of 2,000 units. And when I last looked, it was only a couple of weeks ago, it was still available for sale on Amazon. I don't know if that's changed yet, but 2,000 units is minimal and they haven't sold them. So what does that tell you? So anyway, the speculative market, and the reason why I don't particularly like it, and people that do that, like I said, it comes from my comic book days. It comes from a lot of lessons learned. Now, I did speculate, right? It was hard not to. I was young. We were in the 90s, and much like all the special releases we get today on physical media, the comic book realm went through a similar sort of thing. You had holographic covers, you had acetate covers, you had reflective covers, you had metallic covers, you had die cut covers. Do you know what I mean? There was a wealth of different options. There was ones that were bagged, poly-bagged with trading cards in and maybe a poster and things like this. Death of Superman issue 75. It's very much the same. And I would go out and I'd be like, oh, damn it, you know, I must buy several copies of this just in case the prices go up. And they did on some of them. They really did. Issue 75 of Superman, The Death of Superman, this comic, right, as an example, it sold out within hours of it being released. And I managed to get 5 copies of it, right, because it was on the news that Superman had been killed and nothing like this had ever been done in the comic book realm before. And people went crazy for it. People who weren't even comic readers hit the comic shops just to get The Death of Superman because they bought into it that this was a genuine thing and not just a story. And it sold out, and within a day or two, a comic that had cost maybe £1.85 was trading hands for upward of £80, and people had like 4 or 5 of them. So what are you going to do? I'm going to start selling them on. 80 quid, Christ, I've made a lot of money. I'll keep 2. I'll sell the other 3 at 80 quid a piece, 70 quid a piece. And then what happens? Everyone does that and the market gets flooded again by these comics. So supply and demand kicks in, and inevitably the price drops because, you know, there isn't so much demand and they're becoming more readily available, and it kicks the price back down. And now that comic book itself has probably settled in the region of about £10-15 you can pick it up for. That's the sort of craziness that we went through back then. So it was a tough lesson to learn. And it wasn't just that. It wasn't one item. It was on several, you know, quite a few comic books. If I went through my selection of comic books, I'd probably find issue 1s where I've got 2 or 3 copies of it, and special covers, 2 or 3 copies. And you can probably find them in the bargain bins now, right? So it was a tough lesson to learn. And then I thought, hold on a minute. I took a look. I stepped back. I took a look at myself and I said, you're now stepping into the realm of collecting for the wrong reason. You need to collect because you enjoy collecting. You buy what you enjoy and you get riches out of that enjoyment rather than a financial rich. And, you know, and it's a better way of collecting, I will say. Now, every now and then you may buy something and its value does go up. And that in itself is a bonus. It should be looked upon as being a bonus, nothing more. And that's how I see it within the comic book realm. Now, for me, when I buy comics and collect comics, I'll show you. Now, what I generally do is every single Punisher comic that I buy, I will put in a poly bag with a carded back, like so. Right? Now, all my Punishers have got these, and I've got every Punisher. And they all just sit in boxes, so I can go through them, and I can see all the covers, that sort of a thing. And yeah, and it's fantastic. But a lot of these comics, they're not worth a penny. They're not worth a penny, the Punishers. They're available in bargain bins and this sort of a thing. But for me, being my #1 character, being my favourite comic book character, these are the ones that you know, I would never get rid of. I would never get rid of them, even though they're essentially worthless, right? So that's what I do. Now, with other comics, what I will do is I will, you know, I'll get a pile of them. These are just random comics here, but I'll get a pile of comics and I will, you know, issues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I will polybag them like that. All of them, you know, and then I'll have another bag with the next lot of that series in. And, you know, you might get 6, 7 in a bag, and they kind of protect themselves by becoming a solid unit. But obviously I can't see the covers. I have to pull them out of the bag to have a look. So it's just the Punishers that I really do that with, because they're my number one, and it's got nothing to do with value or worth. Now, like I said, in the physical media collecting world, you see this sort of a thing, and you see people buying for. And like I said, it's not to judge these people. It's not to say what you're doing is wrong, because it's right for them. But if that's what they want to do, and if that's what they believe that they will end up with, they'll end up with something that will eventually, you know, reward them back. But I don't see that happening, right? Because let's not cut any corners here. Let's not, you know, sugarcoat it. Physical media is dying. It is, right? That's inevitable, right? In 20, 30, 40 years' time, this stuff won't be available, right? Whenever it may be. You can look now, right, and you can say, well, hold on a minute. No, there'll always be the sort of prestige format type of releases coming out. Will there? Will there really? You think in 40 years' time? Okay, I might be dead in 40 years' time, who knows, right? But you think in 40 years' time there really will be, right? I think you're thinking too short term, right? Everything changes. It's progress. That's what it is, right? And we're feeling it now. That progress is there. You know it is with streaming and this sort of a thing, right? And physical, you know, films going straight to streaming and not coming out on physical media. It's already begun. The decline has begun. The death has begun. As soon as there's no money in it, it will stop. Of course it will. But yeah, I mean, I used to have a mate. I used to have a mate at work, right? And he was one of these sort of sheeple people, like I will say. You know, that if you like something, he liked it. Now, he cottoned on to me liking comic books, right? And so he started delving into comic books. But he would go after signed comics. He was like, oh, I'm going to get this signed comic because, you know, I like the cover. I like, you know, because I like the artwork on the cover. I like the character. It's signed. It's CGC graded. You know, years down the line, this is going to be worth something, right? Now, I didn't have the heart to say to him, you know, I know what I'm, you know, when it comes to a comic that's CGC graded, I know what I'm looking at, in the sense of I've got a pretty good idea as to whether that comic is going to actually go up in price anymore later on or not, depending on what it is. And he was buying comics that had pretty much only just been released, that pretty much, you know, signed by someone who created it, and it's just a rubbish comic that I know the actual issue of it is worthless, you know, and you've paid 30, 40 quid for it, whatever it is, and you're very lucky if you get a return on it whatsoever. But it always put me off when he came to me and said, I've got this, I've got that, or I'm getting this, because it's, in my mind, it's not really collecting, it's speculating. It really is. I don't, you know, people collect for different reasons, right? But you got to understand now that everyone collects. Back in the day, no one ever used to collect, right? Back in the day, you know that some of these comic books and stuff and figures like the original Star Wars and all that, you know, they're worth a mint. Reason being is that comic books in the early days, they weren't collected. They weren't collected. They were read, they were thrown away, they were passed on, they got ruined. During the war, they were, you know, encouraged to use things for, you know, you'd put things out to be burnt and all this sort of a thing. Papers, all this were needed, all that sort of stuff, right? And figures, no one ever used to collect figures, and it wasn't really until the Star Wars figures started sort of increasing in price, and you found the dinky car toys that increased in price, that now everyone has become a collector. I'm a collector, but I don't collect for financial reasons, because I know at the end of the day, all this stuff around me is gonna be crap. it's going to be worthless. I'll be able to sell it on, of course I will, but I'm not going to be able to sell it on for the money I paid for it. I get it because I enjoy it, no other reason, right? And this is what you've got to understand when it comes to the difference between speculating and collecting, right? The speculative market, right, as physical media dies, it's going to decrease the amount of people purchasing it anyway, right? And that in turn then increases the supply, because there's so many of these items out there at the moment look like an interesting option because they're a limited run of things and you've got a mass market for it. But as that market starts to shrink, this limited run gets bigger and bigger because they become, you know, as one gets smaller, the other grows with it, so to speak. And you've got to remember that when you're selling something, right, you go on eBay, see something for sale at some stupid price, and you got to think, okay, so it's only worth as much as what someone's willing to pay for it at the end of the day, right? And as a speculative market goes, you're going to see, you know, more and more will become available because everyone is collecting, everyone is trying to keep everything in a pristine condition, right? Because everyone thinks it's gonna be worth something, right? Now I keep all mine in pristine condition, of course I do, not because of worth, but because as a collector of comics, of figures, comic books, you know, I would hate it when someone, a friend of mine would come round in the younger days, they'd flick through one of my comic books and they wouldn't hold it in such a way that I would hold it. They would grab hold of it, the spine, you know, no care for the spine on it, and it just used to wind me up. It really did. Because, you know, me holding a comic book, I know what I can do and what I can't do, right? I know full well that I've got no issue if I roll a comic book like so to carry. I won't cause no damage to it. It'll flatten back out. But when I hold a comic book, I will hold it in such a way that my palm is open and I'll be reading it like so and looking. But then you get people who grab it, and as they grab it, you know, they get it tight there and they do you know what I mean? So I come from a world of keeping things in a pristine condition, and that just spilled over into physical media collection. Now, yes, I've had accidents where I've stepped on stuff, and there's stuff that's going to get wear and tear through use. So inevitably, right? But for the most part, I think I'm pretty good with it. And that's not because I want to resell it on or anything like that. I know full well that all this stuff here, I mean, you know, I've spent loads on it on the physical media side of things. And a lot of these Blu-rays even, you know, if I took them down to CEX, they'd give me 1p for them, 1 pence. Yeah, so it don't matter how much of a speculator you are and what you've bought, you've probably spent far more on your collection than what you'd ever make back anyway. You know, so I just wanted to have a little chat. That was it. I just wanted to talk about the difference between a collector who just collects because they enjoy collecting, because they enjoy the content, they enjoy the films, they might enjoy a special edition because of the stuff that comes with it, right? But then you get those people that will buy and their fault is, I've got this because I'm hoping that it will increase in price. Now, like I said, I don't really like that way of collecting. I'll be honest. People, I'm not saying I don't like the person doing it. I'm saying I don't like that manner of collecting. It bugs me. And I'm guilty of it, like I said. So, you know, I look back at myself. But it was for a lot of lessons learned. And now I've settled into being just, I'm going to buy something because I want it. Because I collect that type of a thing. Because I enjoy that film. I quite like the look at a special edition. Not for... I'm hoping that one day I can sell this on, maybe make a little bit of money back. Because that's never going to happen. And I know that. That's the reality. That's the reality of what we live in. Anyway, I'm leaving it there. This is AJ. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Please consider hitting the subscribe button and coming and joining the channel. Leave me a comment down below on your thoughts on collecting, speculating. What sort of a collector do you perceive yourself to be? And where do you fall? You know, are you DVD? Are you 4K? Are you Blu-ray? Whatever it may be. You know, I still buy the DVDs. There's still a world for DVDs. I still buy the Blu-rays. I get the 4Ks. I'm all over the place with it. You know, I've sort of delved into 4K quite heavily over the past few years. But now I'm sort of like wondering whether it is worth it. I don't know, that may be another chat for some time. But anyway, I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of AJ Chats. I'm not sure what the subject will be yet, but it may be of interest to you, may get you thinking, may get the brain batter moving. We'll see. So hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, thumbs up, hit the notification bell, all that stuff, and I'll see you later. Have a wonderful weekend, whatever you're doing. Take care all, and goodbye.